The sun was sinking behind the rugged mesas, painting the desert in fiery shades of orange and red. She stumbled along the rocky trail, her ankle twisted and her spirit nearly broken. Dust clung to her hair, and every step sent sharp pains shooting up her leg. She had been running for hours, running from men whose intentions were cruel and unrelenting, and now the shadows of the cliffs seemed to close in around her. Desperation clawed at her chest, and tears stung her eyes, but she forced herself to keep moving. She couldn't stop, not yet. Then she heard a sound over the wind, steady and deliberate, unlike the footsteps of those chasing her. She froze, heart hammering. From behind a jagged boulder emerged a man, tall, strong, and silent. His presence was commanding, yet there was a calmness in his gaze that seemed to pierce through the fear around her. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged to the land, someone who knew its dangers intimately. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice deep but gentle. He extended a hand toward her. "Let me help you." She looked at him, disbelief mingling with the faintest glimmer of hope. Why would you save a woman like me?" she asked, her voice trembling as she leaned heavily on her other leg. She had seen too much cruelty in the world to believe in selfless acts, and the question slipped out before she could stop it. The man didn't hesitate. He stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering intensity. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. No explanation, no justification, just a certainty that seemed to radiate from his very being. His words shocked her. Worth it? She barely recognized herself any more scared, exhausted, and hunted. How could anyone see worth in someone like her? And yet, in that moment, the fear that had gripped her heart began to loosen, just slightly. He bent down, lifting her carefully into his strong arms. His strength was reassuring, a stark contrast to the fragile weakness she felt within herself. Each step he took across the jagged terrain was steady, unflinching, as if the rocks and sand obeyed him. She clung to him, not just for support, but because, in that instant, she realized that she could trust him. The wind whipped against their faces as he carried her across the desert. He moved with purpose, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Every so often he would glance down at her as though checking not just her safety, but her well-being. It was a strange feeling to be protected, truly and completely, by someone who seemed to care not for her appearance, her past, or her status, but only for the simple fact that she needed help. She wanted to ask more questions, to understand why he was risking himself for her, but the words caught in her throat. His presence was commanding enough to silence doubt, and the desert around them seemed to fade into insignificance. All that mattered was this moment, the strength of his arms, the certainty in his voice, and the unexpected warmth in his gaze. Finally, they reached a sheltered canyon, a place where the sun's last rays barely touched the ground. He set her down gently, brushing dust from her clothes. She looked up at him, her heart racing not from fear this time, but from something she couldn't name. You didn't have to save me," she whispered, voice barely audible. He shook his head, a faint, knowing smile touching his lips. "I did, and I would do it again." "Because you're worth it." And for the first time in days, she believed it. The canyon offered a temporary refuge, but safety was fleeting in the desert. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the shadows grew long and menacing. She huddled close to the Apache, shivering not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline that still coursed through her veins. He had built a small fire with practiced ease, the flames crackling and sending sparks into the darkening sky. "You should rest," he said quietly, his eyes scanning the canyon walls. "You need your strength." She hesitated, unused to being told what to do, and even more unused to obeying without resistance. But there was something in his tone, gentle yet firm, that made defiance feel pointless. Slowly, she lowered herself to the ground near the fire, feeling the heat on her skin. the smell of smoke mixed with the dry desert air, oddly comforting after hours of fear and exhaustion. "I still don't understand," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Why me? Why risk everything for someone like me?" He crouched beside her, his expression calm and unwavering. "Because no one's worth is measured by what others think," he replied. "Every life has value. Every heart deserves protection. And yours has courage you don't even see yet." Her eyes filled with tears, not from weakness, but from the startling clarity of his words. Courage? She barely recognized that quality in herself. She had spent so long hiding from danger, from shame, from a life that seemed determined to break her. And yet, here was this man, someone she had just met, insisting that she was worth saving, worth protecting, worth believing in. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the fire's crackle. Then came a rustling, soft at first, but growing louder. She froze, her heart pounding, her body tensing. "What's that?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood, moving with a fluid, predator-like grace. His eyes scanned the shadows beyond the firelight, muscles coiled and ready. "Stay down," he instructed softly. "Do not move." Before she could react, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man, or perhaps more than one, with intentions that made her stomach twist in fear. The Apache stepped forward, placing himself between her and the danger. His presence was like a shield, strong and immovable, and yet there was a terrifying intensity in his gaze that made the intruders hesitate. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "Leave, or you will regret it." The shadowy figures exchanged uncertain glances. For a moment, it seemed they might challenge him, but then, sensing the determination in his stance, they melted back into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. She exhaled shakily, relief flooding her. Her hands were clammy and her knees weak, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from him. You saved me again," she said, barely above a whisper. He returned to her, crouching by the fire once more. "I will protect you as long as I can," he said simply. "Because it's not about chance or obligation, it's about recognizing worth. And you have it, even if you don't see it yet." Something inside her shifted, a spark of confidence igniting where fear had ruled for so long. For the first time, she didn't feel like a helpless victim. She felt seen. And that recognition, coming from someone as fearless and steadfast as him, was more powerful than any weapon or shield dot as the fire flickered and the desert night deepened. She leaned back, finally allowing herself to rest. For the first time in weeks, sleep came not as a trembling surrender, but as a fragile, hopeful surrender, a hope that maybe, just maybe, she was worth more than she had ever imagined. And in the quiet night, under a blanket of stars, the Apache kept his vigil, watching over her with the unwavering certainty that she was worth every risk, every step and every breath he had taken to save her. Morning came slowly, the desert sun rising like a golden promise over the jagged cliffs. She stirred near the fire, her muscles stiff but her spirit lighter than it had been for days. The Apache was already awake, scanning the horizon with his usual vigilance. He had spent the night watching over her, his presence both protective and silent, like a guardian carved from the land itself. "You're awake," he said simply, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of unspoken concern. She nodded, attempting to hide the way her body ached from the journey. I think I slept," she admitted, though she knew it had been more a fleeting escape from fear than rest. Her eyes lingered on him, curious and hesitant. "I still don't understand how you can care so much about someone like me." He studied her, his gaze steady. "It's not about who you are or who others think you are. It's about what's here." He placed a hand over his chest, over the heart that had guided his actions. "Courage," honesty, resilience. These are what matter. You have all of them, even if you don't realize it yet. She felt a warmth rise in her chest at his words, a strange mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. She wanted to believe him, but old doubts clung stubbornly. "I don't feel courageous," she whispered. "You've survived what most wouldn't," he said, meeting her gaze. "You've endured fear, danger, and uncertainty, and yet you keep moving forward. That's courage. That's worth saving." Before she could respond, the sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the canyon. She froze, her pulse spiking as dust rose from the far side of the rocks. Her breath caught in her throat. They found us," she whispered. The Apache's face tightened, his body moving with swift, instinctive precision. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice low but commanding. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a rocky outcrop that offered cover. The desert, beautiful in daylight, now seemed treacherous. Every shadow a potential threat. Figures emerged, armed and determined, their eyes scanning for movement. The Apache crouched low, motioning for her to stay perfectly still. She obeyed, the terror and adrenaline mixing into a sharp, physical tension she could barely control. One of the intruders moved too close, stepping onto a sunlit ridge. The Apache acted without hesitation, fluid, decisive, and lethal in his movements. Within moments, he had disarmed the man, his presence alone enough to make the others hesitate. She watched, awe and fear mingling, as he protected her with every ounce of strength and skill he possessed. When the danger finally passed, silence fell over the canyon once more. She exhaled shakily, her knees weak. You never hesitate," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Why?" "You could have walked away." He looked at her, his expression unreadable yet gentle. "Because I can't ignore someone who is worth saving," he said. "Because sometimes saving someone isn't about heroics, it's about recognizing value. You're worth it. Always have been." Her heart pounded in response, a strange mix of fear, relief, and something new admiration, maybe even something deeper. For the first time, she saw herself reflected in his eyes, not the frightened, weak girl she had believed herself to be, but someone capable of surviving, someone worth fighting for. The canyon, once a place of danger, now felt like a turning point. The desert wind carried a sense of possibility, a promise that she might not only survive, but also begin to believe in her own worth. She realized with a quiet, growing certainty that the Apache had given her more than safety, he had given her hope. And standing there beside him, she understood that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt and perhaps even strengthened by courage, care, and the unwavering belief of someone willing to risk everything for her. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the canyon floor. She walked cautiously beside the Apache, each step a careful negotiation with the rocky terrain. Her ankle had begun to stiffen, but the adrenaline from last night's encounter kept her moving. Even so, a lingering fear tugged at her chest. She knew the men who had chased them were still out there. "You need to keep moving," the Apache said, his voice steady, calm, yet carrying an unmistakable urgency. "We can't stay in one place." "They'll return." She nodded, silently following him, though doubt gnawed at her. Every instinct screamed to hide, to run, to surrender to the fear that had been her companion for so long. Yet something about him made her feel protected, like the storm outside might rage, but within his presence, she was untouchable. The desert stretched endlessly, a harsh beauty of sun-baked rocks and golden sand. They moved in silence, the only sounds the crunch of sand beneath their feet and the distant cries of birds circling the cliffs. Every so often he would glance back, ensuring she hadn't fallen behind, his gaze softening whenever their eyes met. She felt an unfamiliar warmth at the attention, a feeling she hadn't realized she craved hours later. As they approached a narrow pass between two cliffs, movement caught his eye. He froze instantly, signaling for her to do the same. Shadows shifted among the rocks, and she felt her heart hammering violently against her ribs. Her fingers gripped his arm instinctively, needing the strength he radiated. "Stay behind me," he whispered. No sudden moves. A group of armed men appeared, moving stealthily along the ridgeline. The Apache assessed them quickly, calculating distance, position, and potential threat. "They won't leave without a fight," he said quietly. "We have to act now, or they'll cut us off." Before she could protest or panic, he lunged forward with speed and precision that made her gasp. He disarmed the nearest man, his movements fluid, deadly, and controlled. Another tried to flank them, but he anticipated it, spinning with the grace of someone completely in tune with the land and danger. She watched, frozen but mesmerized. As he protected her again, his focus absolute, every action calculated to ensure her safety. When the last man fled, beaten and humiliated, the Apache exhaled slowly, finally allowing himself to relax. She stepped closer, her legs trembling not from exertion, but from the intensity of witnessing such fearless protection. How do you do that?" she asked softly. "How can you be so calm, so certain?" He looked at her, expression unchanging yet somehow softening at her words. "Because I know what's worth protecting," he said. "And I know what's worth risking everything for. You're worth it." The words struck her again, hitting deeper than before. Each time he said them, the fear inside her ebbed slightly, replaced by something she couldn't name: admiration, trust, perhaps the beginnings of hope. For so long she had believed herself insignificant, fragile, unworthy of care or protection. But in his eyes she saw a different truth, one that made her chest tighten with emotion. As they continued along the pass, the wind whispering through the cliffs, she realized she was beginning to rely on him, not just for protection, but for guidance, for stability, for the quiet reassurance that she was not alone. With every step, she felt herself growing stronger, not just physically, but emotionally, as if the courage he saw in her was finally beginning to bloom. And in that rugged canyon, under the relentless sun, she understood that their journey together was not merely about survival, it was about trust, recognition, and the kind of connection that transforms fear into courage, and doubt into belief. The Apache glanced back once more, meeting her eyes with that unwavering gaze. "Keep moving," he said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you." And for the first time, she truly believed him. The desert air grew heavier as midday approached, the sun beating down on them with relentless intensity. She stumbled over a loose rock, wincing at the sharp pain in her ankle. The Apache didn't hesitate. He was instantly by her side, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. She had started to expect it, yet each time it happened, a flutter of gratitude and something more took root in her chest. "You can't push yourself too far," he said, his voice steady, carrying no reproach, only concern. "We need to reach higher ground before nightfall." She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body and the quiet steadiness that seemed to surround him. "I keep asking myself why you care," she murmured. "Why you risk so much for me. And every time you say the same thing, that I'm worth it. I don't even know what that means for me yet." He glanced down at her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "It means that you matter, that your life, your heart, and even your fear are worth protecting. You might not see your own strength, but I do. And I always will." A gust of wind swept across the canyon, carrying dust and the scent of dry earth. Up ahead, the terrain shifted. A narrow ridge led to a steep drop, jagged rocks lining the canyon below. The path was treacherous, and one misstep could send her tumbling into danger. She froze at the sight, fear coiling like a snake in her stomach. "We have to cross it," he said gently. "But I'll carry you." "You don't have to fight it alone." She hesitated, the pride in her chest warring with the relief that surged at his words. Slowly, she nodded, letting him lift her into his arms again. The weight of his presence enveloped her, both literal and emotional. Every step he took along the narrow ridge was deliberate, confident, as if the ground itself obeyed his command. Halfway across, a sudden rock slide rattled the cliffside. Dust and pebbles tumbled past them, and her heart leapt into her throat. He shifted instinctively, holding her tighter, his body a shield against the chaos. "Don't look down," he instructed, his voice calm, unwavering. "Focus on me. I've got you." Her hands clutched his shoulders as he moved, each step a dance with danger. Yet through the fear, a strange clarity settled in her mind. She realized how much trust she had placed in him, not just for her physical safety, but for her sense of security in a world that had long felt cruel and unpredictable. Finally, they reached solid ground, the ridge behind them as treacherous as the memories she carried. He set her down gently, brushing dust from her clothes and examining her ankle with care. "You're stronger than you think," he said, "and you've earned every bit of protection I can give." She looked at him, the words he had repeated so often echoing in her mind. "You're worth it." For the first time, she felt the truth of them resonate inside her, not as a statement about her worth in the eyes of the world, but as a recognition of her own inner courage, her ability to survive, and her capacity to trust someone fully. The sun was high now, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. She rose to her feet, wincing but determined, and met his gaze. I think I understand now," she whispered. Maybe I am worth it." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, the first glimmer of softness she had seen behind his warrior's eyes. "You always were," he said simply. For the first time since her journey began, fear felt less like a chain and more like a challenge she could face. Not alone, but with someone who believed in her completely. And as they continued forward, side by side, the bond between them grew deeper, a connection forged not just in danger, but in trust, courage, and the quiet, undeniable recognition that some people are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The afternoon sun scorched the desert landscape, turning the canyon into a furnace. Sweat ran down her brow, her throat parched, and her legs ached from the long trek. Yet she walked beside him, leaning occasionally on his steady presence rather than his strength alone. The Apache moved with ease across the rocky terrain, his every step sure, every glance alert. She had begun to notice the little things, how his eyes scanned for danger, how his hands never faltered when helping her, how his presence alone seemed to carve a path of safety through the harsh wilderness. Suddenly, a low rumble vibrated through the canyon. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the ground beneath their feet shivered violently. Dust rose from the distant cliffs, and before she could react, a section of the canyon wall crumbled. Rocks tumbled, small at first, then larger, crashing down toward the path they had just crossed. Her heart leapt, and fear surged like a tidal wave. The Apache reacted instantly. He swept her into his arms with a fluidity born of instinct. "Hold on tight," he shouted over the roar of falling stone. He darted sideways, away from the cascading debris, every movement precise and controlled, like a predator navigating a storm. She clung to him, her pulse racing, the fear mingling with the strange, grounding certainty that he would not let her fall. "You're not getting away from me," he called, his voice carrying over the chaos. "I've got you." Her mind raced. Just hours ago, she had questioned why he cared, why he risked everything for her. Now, suspended in his arms amidst a torrent of danger, she understood in a way words could never capture. He didn't save her because he had to. He saved her because he chose to, because he saw worth where she had only seen weakness. A massive boulder tumbled. perilously close, and he pivoted, letting it slide harmlessly past while keeping her secure. She gasped, clutching him tighter, feeling the pounding of his heart against hers. The rush of adrenaline, the heat of the sun, the fear of the fall, it all combined into a surreal moment of clarity. She wasn't helpless. She was alive, protected by someone who believed in her even when she struggled to believe in herself. Finally, the canyon settled into an uneasy calm. Dust swirled around them, settling on their clothes and hair, but they were safe. He lowered her gently to the ground, brushing dirt from her shoulders with careful hands. She looked up at him, breathless, awestruck, and deeply moved. "You? You saved me again," she whispered, voice shaking. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head, his expression serious yet gentle. "There's no need for thanks," he said. "I don't save you for gratitude. I save you because it matters. Because you're worth it." She stared at him, the words settling into her like a balm. For so long, she had believed she was invisible, expendable, unworthy of care. And yet here he was, time and again, risking himself for her, not out of obligation, but out of recognition of her courage, her spirit, her value. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the whispering wind and the settling dust. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly see him not just as a protector, but as someone whose unwavering presence had begun to heal the fear and self-doubt she had carried for so long. I think I understand now," she said softly, voice trembling but steady. "You're not just saving me. You're showing me that I can be worth something, even to myself." He nodded, a rare, small smile brushing his lips. "Exactly," he said. "And I'll keep showing you as long as I can." As they moved forward once more, the canyon stretching endlessly around them, she felt a shift deep within herself. Fear was still there, it would never fully leave, but now it was tempered by trust, courage, and the quiet, undeniable truth that some people are worth every risk, every step, and every heartbeat. And in that blazing desert, side by side, they continued their journey, two souls bound by trust, survival, and the fragile, growing realization of something far deeper than mere safety. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor as they continued their trek. Fatigue weighed heavily on her, but she didn't complain. Not anymore. She had begun to trust him, not only for protection, but as a guide, a steadying presence in a world that had felt cruel and unpredictable. With each step, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her, a courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Wait," she said suddenly, stopping him. Her chest heaved from exertion and something deeper: hesitation, fear, uncertainty. I need to ask you something." He glanced down at her, attentive, eyes steady. "Anything," he said simply. "Why? Why do you keep saving me?" Her voice was barely audible, trembling with vulnerability. "You could walk away. You could leave me to my fate. I've seen men like you leave. So why not just go?" He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he crouched to meet her eye level. "Because someone has to see what others ignore," he said, voice low but unwavering. "Because everyone deserves a chance. And you? You deserve more than the world has shown you. I see your courage, your heart, your strength. That makes you worth it." Her throat tightened, and tears she hadn't realized she was holding threatened to spill. She had spent so long doubting herself, feeling invisible, unworthy of care or protection. And now, standing before her, was someone who not only protected her with his life, but also recognized something she couldn't yet see in herself. They continued walking, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable but charged with meaning. She found herself studying him, not just his strength and skill, but the way he moved with certainty, the subtle gentleness in his voice, the unwavering calm in his eyes. Every step with him seemed to teach her something new about courage, trust, and value. As they rounded a bend, they came across a shallow creek, the water glinting in the fading sunlight. She knelt by it, cupping the cool water in her hands, and drank deeply. He watched, leaning against a rock, alert as ever. She realized then how much she had come to rely on him, not just physically, but emotionally. She wanted to tell him, but the words felt inadequate, fragile. How could she possibly convey the impact of someone believing in her when she had spent years believing herself worthless? "You're thinking too much," he said suddenly, as if reading her mind. His voice carried a warmth that made her glance up. "You don't have to explain or justify your worth. I see it." "That's enough." Her chest swelled with emotion, a mixture of relief, awe, and something tender that she couldn't name. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel not fear, not doubt, but recognition. Recognition that she mattered. Recognition that she could trust someone fully. Recognition that perhaps she was capable of more than mere survival. The wind whispered across the desert, carrying the scent of sage and earth. She reached out, hesitating, then let her fingers brush against his hand. He didn't flinch. Instead, he met her gaze, a flicker of surprise passing over his features, quickly replaced by calm affirmation. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "Not with me." Her heart thumped violently, but she nodded, feeling an unexpected, steady warmth spreading through her. Fear still lingered, as it always would, but it was tempered by trust, courage, and the undeniable sense that she was no longer alone. And as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the canyon in shades of gold and crimson, she realized that their journey was no longer just about survival. It was about understanding, connection, and the kind of bond that grows only through shared danger, unwavering trust, and the recognition that some people are truly worth saving. And in that moment, side by side, she understood a truth she had never dared to hope. She was worth it. And so was the bond forming between them. The desert night was quiet at first. The stars scattered across the sky like scattered diamonds. But the stillness was deceptive. From the far ridge came a faint sound, hoofbeats, deliberate and growing louder. She froze, the fear she had fought so hard to keep at bay suddenly surging back. "They're coming," the Apache said softly, his voice low but controlled. He moved instinctively, positioning himself between her and the approaching threat. "Stay close to me." She nodded, heart pounding, and fell into step beside him, letting his presence guide her. He led them through a narrow passage, shadows wrapping around them, offering concealment. Her body tensed, but she felt a strange sense of security in his steadiness. He didn't just shield her physically, he seemed to absorb the fear around her, making her own heartbeat slow just enough to think clearly. From the darkness, 3 figures emerged, mounted on horses, their faces shadowed by the brim of their hats. They were clearly searching, and their eyes glinted with intent. She felt the familiar rush of terror rise in her chest. "You'll need to stay very still," he whispered. "And trust me." She did. She pressed herself against the canyon wall, holding her breath, watching as he moved silently, assessing the situation with practiced precision. Every glance, every subtle movement of his body was measured and calculated. In moments, he had positioned them in a hidden alcove, shielded from view, yet with a clear path for escape if needed. The men passed dangerously close, their horses' hooves kicking up dust. She could feel the heat and hear the tension in the air, and for a brief moment, fear threatened to overtake her. But she reminded herself of what she had learned. He would not let anything happen to her. She had to trust him completely, as she had begun to do in the days since he first saved her. When the riders finally passed, disappearing into the night, she exhaled, her shoulders trembling with the release of tension. "How do you always know what to do?" she whispered, awe and gratitude mingling in her voice. He turned, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "I don't know everything," he admitted, "but I know enough to keep you safe. And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you get through this." She swallowed, the words sinking in. His certainty, his unwavering belief in her worth, and his quiet strength had become a lifeline. She realized then that she had begun to rely on him not just for protection, but for guidance, courage, and the reassurance that someone could see her as more than just a frightened girl. "You make me feel like I'm worth something," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Even when I can't see it myself." He gave her a small, faint smile, the first one that felt almost vulnerable, almost tender. "Because you are," he said simply. "You always were. I just remind you." The night around them seemed to breathe in response, the desert calm once more. But she knew that danger was never truly gone. It lurked just beyond the canyon walls, in the shadows and the unknown. Yet for the first time, she felt a strength she hadn't possessed before. Not just physical, but emotional, the courage to face uncertainty, and the trust that she didn't have to face it alone. As they continued along the hidden path, side by side, the bond between them deepened, built on shared peril, trust, and the quiet, unwavering recognition that some people are worth every risk. She understood now that his protection was not just about survival, it was about showing her that she mattered, that her life, her courage, and her heart were valuable. And in the desert night, under a blanket of stars, she felt something stirred deep within her, a fragile, growing certainty that perhaps she could finally believe in herself because someone else already did. The following morning, the desert sun rose harsh and unforgiving, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. She rubbed her aching limbs and tried to ignore the tight knot of anxiety lingering in her chest. The events of the night, the riders, the close calls still echoed in her mind. Yet beside her, the Apache moved with his usual calm, every step measured, every glance alert. His presence had become her anchor, steady and unwavering in a world that had long been chaotic and unpredictable. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, noticing her hesitation. She nodded, though her voice faltered. I think so." She drew in a shaky breath, bracing herself for what lay ahead. Her trust in him had grown, but the fear that danger was never far behind remained. No sooner had they begun walking than a sudden flash of movement caught her eye. A group of men appeared from behind a ridge, their weapons raised and eyes fixed on them. Her heart leapt, panic threatening to take over. "They're back!" she cried, her voice trembling. The Apache reacted instantly, positioning himself between her and the approaching threat. "Stay close. Move quickly. Don't look back," he instructed, his voice calm but commanding. His movements were fluid, a perfect balance of speed and precision. As he scanned the terrain for an escape route, she pressed herself against him instinctively, feeling his strength beneath her fingertips. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to cower, but she stayed, knowing that he would guide her through this danger. The bond they had formed over the past days had become more than reliance. It was a lifeline, a shared understanding that they were stronger together. One of the men fired, the crack of the gunshot shattering the still morning air. Dust and pebbles sprayed around them, and she flinched. He moved like lightning, pulling her to cover behind a jagged boulder. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and unwavering, radiating calm reassurance. "You'll be fine," he said softly, though his eyes were sharp and alert. "Trust me," she nodded, letting his words anchor her. Her fear was still there, but it was tempered by the knowledge that he would not let anything happen to her. She watched, awestruck, as he disarmed one attacker and forced the others to retreat with strategic precision. Each movement, each calculated risk, displayed not just skill but a deep commitment to her safety. When the dust settled and silence returned, she exhaled shakily, her knees weak. You saved me again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How can you keep doing this?" He crouched beside her, brushing dust from her clothes, his expression softening. "Because it matters," he said. "Not just that you survive, but that you realize your worth. Courage, heart, resilience. You have all of these, and I'll keep reminding you. Even when you can't see it yourself." Her chest swelled with emotion. For so long, she had believed herself invisible, unworthy of care, unworthy of protection. And now, standing here, alive because of him, she felt a fragile new certainty growing within her, that she could be more than she had ever imagined. I think I understand now," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "You're not just saving me. You're showing me that I can be worth something, even when I can't see it myself." He nodded, a small, rare smile touching his lips. "Exactly. You always were." The desert around them stretched endlessly, yet she no longer felt small or powerless. Fear remained, but it had been tempered by trust, courage, and the recognition that someone else believed in her unconditionally. And in that belief, she found the strength to believe in herself. As they continued their journey, side by side, she realized that their connection had grown beyond mere survival. It was trust, respect, and something tender yet unspoken, a bond forged in danger and deepened by unwavering courage and care. She was no longer just a woman fleeing peril. She was someone who mattered, someone worth fighting for, and someone who had finally begun to see the truth of her own worth. The desert sun was beginning its descent, casting long, golden shadows across the rugged canyon. The journey had been long and grueling, each day marked by danger, uncertainty, and the constant test of courage. Yet, as they moved side by side, she realized how much she had changed. The fear that had once dominated her life had been replaced slowly, carefully by trust, resilience, and a budding confidence she had never thought possible. Ahead, the canyon opened into a wide plateau. It was the safest stretch they had seen in days, offering both visibility and space. She paused for a moment, taking in the vast expanse, the sky streaked with shades of amber and crimson. She felt the weight of everything she had endured pressing against her chest, and yet, alongside it, a growing sense of peace. The Apache noticed her hesitation and stepped closer. "We're almost there," he said quietly. "Just a little farther." His gaze softened as he studied her. "You've come a long way, not just across this land, but in yourself." She looked at him, heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper, something tender she could not yet name. I couldn't have done this without you," she whispered. "You've saved me more times than I can count. And yet, it's more than that. You've shown me I'm worth it, that I matter." He shook his head slightly, a small smile touching his lips. "You always mattered. I just never let you forget it." They moved forward together, careful and deliberate, until the sun's last rays lit the plateau. There, for the first time in days, she felt safe, not just from the threats that had pursued her, but from the shadows of her own doubts. She had survived. She had trusted. She had allowed herself to be seen, protected, and valued. And in doing so, she had discovered a courage that had always been within her, waiting for someone to remind her that it was real. A gentle breeze stirred across the plateau, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. She turned to him, the man who had been her protector, her guide, her anchor in the chaos. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Thank you. For everything. For saving me, and for believing in me." He studied her, eyes unwavering, and finally spoke with quiet certainty. "I didn't save you for thanks. I saved you because you're worth it. Because every life, every heart that dares to survive, deserves protection. And because I saw something in you that couldn't be ignored." Her chest tightened, and she realized that it wasn't just gratitude she felt. It was trust, admiration, and a fragile, growing bond that had formed in the crucible of danger and shared survival. She had come to rely on him, not only for her safety but for the strength to believe in herself, to see her own worth through his eyes. For a moment, silence fell over them, filled only by the whispering wind and the fading warmth of the sun. Then she spoke again, softer, almost a breath. "I believe you. I believe that I'm worth it. And I believe in you too." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle yet deliberate. "Then we'll keep moving forward," he said, his voice low, steady, and filled with quiet promise. Together, and as the desert night fell around them, the stars stretching infinitely overhead, she understood that their journey had become something more than survival. It was trust, connection, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that some people are worth every risk, every step, and every heartbeat. She had found her strength. She had found her courage, and standing there, side by side with the man who had saved her, she realized she had found something else, too, the kind of bond that transforms fear into hope, despair into trust, and doubt into the certainty of being truly seen, valued, and protected. For the first time, she didn't just survive, she flourished.